It's interesting. Over the years, I've used my wildlife neighbors as central characters in stories or images, and in this particular image. I started with the idea of a creature, a nocturnal creature, and I always remember coming home at night and you'd see an opossum crossing the road, and it was always intriguing. They would sort of waddle, in slow movement. But having said all that, oftentimes it just sort of comes to you. It's that's the magical part, I think, of creating images or creating almost anything, is that oftentimes there's an interest and a pull towards something where you're not sure what's prompting it. Now, after that happens with the opossum, I thought about when the idea of splitting the screen, the two images, an opossum hanging by its tail, and then later on top of a branch, a limb. So, and it's interesting in this particular case, which rarely happens. It started out that way with an opossum, and it grew from there, and then the stars, and then the butterflies. But I watched it grow, and also after I did the first initial thumbnail, I did a bunch of others, similar but different ideas, all using that sort of kind of split screen. I just sort of felt right, and but that opossum hanging by its tail, and then on the limb, was my first thumbnail. It rarely ever happens, and what a delight when it does. I met my first professional artist. I grew up in a family that really, where there were no artists or visual artists in the neighborhood. And my family, they were not really museum goers. They didn't visit museums. However, they always provided us, especially the boys, the simplest of materials. For instance, we drew with pencils, which all kids, but we had plenty of pencils because my grandfather worked in a pencil factory right down the street from our home. And at the age of 11, I took a job, my first job, selling newspapers at a very busy intersection on the corner of Germantown and Shelton Avenue in Philadelphia. And I would actually take a drawing pad and pencils with me, and I would draw people waiting for the bus or the trolley. And I think I first started out by drawing the window displays. It was a very large department store, and they would change the window displays, and I would treat them almost as if it was a still life. And then I started drawing people who would stop to to buy a newspaper, and it was interesting because at some point I would oftentimes just give the drawings away, not thinking about the fact that that would always mean a return customer. And that happened. So I drew people waiting for the bus, the trolley, buying a paper from me, quick sketches, of course, and then, of course, drawing, really spending much more time on much larger drawings of the window displays. Turned out that one of the artists, my customers was a professional artist. His name was John Liney. And he was the cartoonist on a syndicated comic strip, Henry, at the time. And he took note of me drawing one day, and he invited me up to his studio. Now, I want to return back to what I said earlier. No artists in the family or in the neighborhood. So now I'm meeting my first professional artist, and he invites me into his studio. And one day, before work, I did stop in to see Mr. Liney. You can imagine the kind of excitement of being in an artist's studio. I think that what really struck me more than anything else was the fact that I had no idea what a professional artist did. And here was Mr. Liney, who got up in the morning and he went to work, doing the very same thing I'd love doing, drawing. And now, did I leave there and say, well, if I worked hard enough or studied hard enough, I would become an artist like John Liney? I'm not sure it happened just like that, but I am sure that that was when the seed of possibility was planted. It was very interesting, and we're fortunate and blessed the fact that we have a family full of creative minds, and in different areas, photography, illustration, and design, and in writing. And one of the things that is exciting about all of this is this opportunity that, in many ways, we can share in the other's success as well as the times when it becomes more challenging. We speak very often the same language, and so we know what each other's going through. And it's also that feeling of being part of something much larger than just myself. It's a family, and even the impact of, and you think about the number of books that have come out of the Pinkney family. My wife, Gloria Jean, there's Brian and Andrea Davis Pinkney, and Sandra and Miles, and up to date, I've lost the count on the number of books. So that's pretty spectacular. The other piece that is important to remember too is that there are when we get together, and there are family members who are perhaps not in the creative area. That's a time where we come together and we speak about those other things that are valuable to a family, like the grandchildren and now a great-granddaughter. So all that comes into play, which means that the circle of conversation is quite broad. I was an adult when I learned that my challenges, especially in school and very early, came from a learning disability. I'm dyslexic. However, I knew something wasn't quite right. And I learned as an adult that this was a problem. One of the things that has helped me through this time was I had the sense of family, and as a kid growing up, I was always supported, and through my mother and my father, there was this sense that I could achieve, even though they knew their son was struggling. So I had support, and I think perhaps that allowed me to try to move forward with this disability, with this challenge. I don't know if I quite understood learning differences at that time, but I wanted to learn, and I knew that my process was a little slower than others. Now, I want to talk about something else that's very important, because I also understood that there was something about Jerry Pinkney that was special, or that there was something there that my fellow students and friends couldn't do, and that was the ability to draw. So I leaned on that strength, and I think my self-esteem and this sort of balance that every child needs was in check by the fact that there was something that I knew I could do that maybe others could not do as well. And so my advice to young children, young adults is to find that core, that center where you feel that you can express yourself even with that challenge, and lean on it, I like to draw on it, but use it to help guide you in understanding that, okay, this is here, but there's this other thing that's in place, and actually both make you whole.